I stood there, staring at the anniversary gift he had given me. A simple box, yet it felt like the weight of my entire world crashing down. His words echoed in my mind. "I'm sorry, I can't make it today." But today was supposed to be special. Today was our day, the day we promised we'd never break. He betrayed me, not just once, but in the worst way possible. And that betrayal? It would be the start of something he could never take back. Imagine being in my shoes, heartbroken, betrayed, and left to pick up the pieces. But this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. A year later, I would make sure his next birthday would be a curse he'd never forget. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single twist in this journey of revenge. You won't want to miss what happens next. I spent the next few days in a fog. I couldn't escape the image of him, standing there with his excuse. I had always believed in second chances, but what he did shattered something deep within me. The trust I had placed in him, the years we had shared, all felt like they meant nothing. I wanted to move on, to forget, but how could I? How could I ever look at him the same way again? As the days dragged on, I found myself replaying our anniversary night over and over in my mind. Every detail, his hesitation, his lack of attention, the way he couldn't even be bothered to show up. I was left alone, feeling as though I was no longer important to him, and yet he still wanted to talk to me, to apologize, to ask for forgiveness. But I couldn't forgive him, not yet, not after everything. But something changed within me that day. I started to think about what would make him understand the depth of his betrayal. I was angry, hurt, and confused. But most of all, I felt powerless. He had gotten away with it. He had broken my heart, yet he still had the nerve to ask me to forgive him. What right did he have? I knew I couldn't let it go. I needed to make him feel what I felt, so that he would understand how it felt to be betrayed by someone you loved. I couldn't act in the heat of the moment. I needed time to plan. I spent the next few months preparing myself, both emotionally and mentally. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for the future. I had to ensure that when his next birthday came around, it wouldn't be the celebration he had hoped for. I had to make it something unforgettable, something he would regret for the rest of his life. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I began reaching out to people who had been hurt by similar betrayals, those who understood the pain of being left behind. I wasn't going to go down this path alone. I needed to build something, to create a plan so well thought out that no one could trace it back to me. But I also needed to ensure he wouldn't see it coming, that he wouldn't suspect a thing. There was one person I knew who had the resources to help. A mutual friend, someone who had always been in the shadows, someone who knew how to disappear without a trace. This person wasn't just going to help me execute the plan, they were going to make sure everything went according to my design. In the weeks that followed, we began laying the groundwork. But I wasn't just planning a simple act of revenge. I was creating a story where he would play the lead role, a story where his birthday would become the stage for everything he had taken from me, a stage where he wouldn't even realize that the real performance was about to begin. The weeks leading up to his birthday felt like an eternity. But every moment I spent planning made me more determined. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. No, this was about showing him what it felt like to lose everything, to be powerless, to watch as something slipped through your fingers, something you thought you could never lose. I watched him. Every move he made, his messages, his calls, the way he smiled as if nothing had happened, as if the betrayal had never occurred. It made my stomach turn. It was as if he had already forgiven himself. But I couldn't forgive him. Not yet. I knew I had to strike carefully, to make sure he wouldn't see it coming. The perfect plan needed time to unfold, and it needed precision. It needed to be more than just a simple act. It needed to be an experience, a life-changing, unforgettable experience. The first thing I did was set up an encounter. I started subtly. I invited him to lunch to talk things through, but it wasn't really about that. It was about planting a seed, a feeling of normalcy that he could latch onto. I had to make him feel comfortable again to lower his guard. He came, expecting us to mend things, but he had no idea that this was only the first step in a much larger game. During the lunch, I made sure to mention things from the past, times when we were happy, moments when we laughed together, how he used to make me feel special. But I watched his face carefully, looking for any hint of guilt, any trace of remorse. There was none. Instead, he smiled, talking about how much better he felt now, how he thought we could get back to where we were, how he hoped I'd forgive him so we could move forward. I couldn't let him believe it was that simple. I had to make him see that what he did wasn't just some minor slip-up. I wasn't going to just forgive him because he wanted me to. This was deeper than that. And so, I let him talk. I let him believe that things might go back to normal. But deep down, I knew I was taking notes. Taking mental notes on everything he said, how he reacted, how he tried to manipulate me into thinking that things could just go back to normal. When we finished lunch, I made it clear that I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. I told him that I needed time, that we had to figure things out at my pace, not his. I saw the flicker of irritation in his eyes, but he held his tongue. He knew better than to push me too far. After that lunch, I knew I had him where I wanted him. I had made him feel like everything was going to be fine, that he had another chance. But that was only the beginning. Now it was time to set the stage for his birthday. I needed to put the finishing touches on my plan and make sure every detail was in place. He would have no idea what was coming for him. The days passed slowly as I continued to prepare for his birthday. There were times when I found myself questioning my plan, wondering if I was going too far. But each time doubt crept in, I remembered the betrayal. I remembered how he had looked me in the eyes and lied. How he had made me feel like I wasn't worth the time, the love, the loyalty. That thought erased any lingering doubts. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing this for every person who's ever been left behind, ignored, or betrayed. This was my chance to show him what it felt like to be powerless. I could already picture the scene in my mind. His face as he walked into the trap I had set for him. He would think it was just another birthday celebration, one that would be just like the others. But what he didn't know was that I had planned every moment to be a cruel twist of fate. I was going to make him relive the pain he caused me, step by step, until he couldn't take it anymore. Everything had to be perfect. Every detail mattered. I had spent weeks planning, working in silence, ensuring no one would suspect anything. I had to get the timing right, to make sure it was the perfect moment to strike. I couldn't risk him realizing what I was doing too early. The first step was the invitation. It had to be casual, something that would lure him in without suspicion. I sent him a text, asking him to come over for his birthday. I told him I wanted to make it up to him that I was ready to forgive him. His response was quick, a sigh of relief that I could almost hear through the words. He was so desperate for everything to be okay again, he didn't even consider that my invitation was the first step of a much larger plan. The next part of the plan involved a gift. But this wouldn't be just any gift. It would be something personal, something that would remind him of the good times we had. I spent hours selecting the perfect item, the one thing that would tug at his heartstrings. I wrapped it carefully, knowing full well that it would be the key to opening old wounds. I wanted him to feel guilt, regret, and longing all at once. But most importantly, I wanted him to feel the sting of loss, the way I had felt that night on our anniversary. I could almost picture his face when he opened the gift. I knew he would smile, perhaps even tear up, thinking he was the luckiest man alive. But what he didn't know was that it wasn't a gift at all. It was a symbol of everything he had taken from me. Every time he looked at it, he would remember the betrayal. He would remember the trust he had broken and how I had been the one to pick up the pieces. As the days drew closer, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I knew I was walking a fine line between justice and revenge, between healing and destruction. But what he didn't know was that I had already made my peace with it. This wasn't just about hurting him. It was about making him understand the weight of his actions, the way they had shattered not only my heart, but his own. I wasn't just giving him a taste of his own medicine. I was giving him a wake-up call, one he would never forget. His birthday finally arrived, and with it came the final stage of my plan. I had invited him to meet me at the same restaurant where we had celebrated his last birthday together. It was a place that held so many memories, memories that I had now come to despise. But I needed him to feel the weight of the place, to understand that this was where it all began, and this would be where it all ended. He arrived exactly on time, his usual smile plastered across his face, thinking this would be just another typical birthday dinner. He had no idea that the person sitting across from him had completely changed. He couldn't see the coldness in my eyes or the bitterness in my smile. He was too busy celebrating his new, seemingly restored relationship with me. Little did he know, I had been preparing something far worse than he could have ever anticipated. I greeted him warmly, masking the storm raging inside me. He seemed happy, relieved even, as if he had just been given a second chance at life. The moment we sat down, he started talking about his plans for the future. He told me about the things he wanted to achieve, the things he wanted us to do together, and for a moment, I almost felt like it was the old him, the man I had once loved. But then I remembered the betrayal, the anniversary that had haunted my every waking thought for months. And I couldn't go back to that version of him. Not anymore. We ate our meal in relative silence, the tension between us palpable. I could see the unease creeping into his eyes as he waited for me to speak, unsure of what was coming. But I kept my thoughts to myself, letting the silence grow. I wasn't ready to reveal anything just yet. I wanted to savor the moment when I would finally drop the bomb on him, the moment when he realized that everything he thought he knew was about to be turned upside down. As the meal came to an end, I knew it was time. I had waited long enough. I asked the waiter to bring out the dessert I had ordered, and when it arrived, I made sure to tell him it was a surprise from me. I wanted him to feel special, just as he had made me feel on so many occasions. He looked at me with an innocent smile, his guard completely down. But the smile faded the moment he saw what was on the plate. It wasn't a typical birthday dessert. It wasn't a cake with a candle or a plate of his favorite sweets. No, it was something far more personal. It was a small, framed photo of the two of us on our anniversary, the very anniversary that he had betrayed me. The photo was set inside a custom frame with one word written beneath it: regret. His eyes widened as he stared at the photo, and for the first time, I saw something in him that I hadn't seen before: guilt. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers tracing the edges of the frame. I could tell he was trying to hold it together, but the reality was sinking in. He could no longer pretend like nothing had happened. He could no longer hide behind his excuses. I watched as the color drained from his face, and for the first time, I felt the satisfaction of knowing that he finally understood the depth of his mistake. I didn't say a word as I watched him try to recover. I didn't need to. The look on his face spoke volumes. And in that moment, I knew that I had made him feel exactly what I had felt all those months ago: the sting of betrayal, the crushing weight of regret, the slow realization that nothing would ever be the same again. The air between us grew thick with tension as I watched him silently examine the photo. His mind raced, I could tell, but there were no words, just a flicker of panic behind his eyes. He wanted to say something, anything, to fix it, but I wasn't going to make it that easy for him. He had already ruined everything, and no apology, no desperate plea could undo what he had done. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. I watched as he picked up the frame, his hands trembling. He couldn't look me in the eye. Instead, his gaze stayed fixed on the photo, his expression growing more somber with each passing second. I could see the gears turning in his mind, trying to figure out what had just happened. He had walked into this dinner expecting a simple reconciliation, a return to the comfortable life we once shared. But instead, he had been confronted with his past mistakes, a mistake he had never truly atoned for. "What is this?" he finally managed to choke out, his voice unsteady. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, letting him sit with the uncomfortable silence that had begun to envelop us. I could feel the heat in my chest, but I kept my face calm. I had no intention of showing him just how much his betrayal had cut me. That was the power I had over him now, the power of control. He was the one who needed to confront his actions, not me. He was the one who needed to feel small. "It's a reminder," I said quietly. "A reminder of what you did. A reminder of how you shattered something beautiful. A reminder that actions have consequences." He flinched at my words, but he didn't look up. He had been caught off guard, and for once, I had the upper hand. I could see the guilt creeping into his expression, but there was something else, too. A realization that he wasn't going to escape this. Not anymore. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you," he said, the words tumbling out of his mouth in a rushed, desperate attempt to fix everything. "I know you're sorry," I replied, my voice steady. "But sorry doesn't erase the damage, does it?" I watched him struggle to find something to say. He was trying to piece together an explanation, an excuse, anything that would make this better. But no matter what he said, it wouldn't change the fact that he had betrayed me. No words would undo the lies, the neglect, the broken promises. I had given him everything, and he had thrown it all away. And now, this was the result. He dropped the photo back onto the table, his hand shaking. For a moment, I thought he might cry, but no tears came. Instead, he just sat there, defeated, staring at the table. It was as though the man I once knew had vanished completely. All that remained was a shadow of the person who had hurt me, a person who no longer deserved my forgiveness. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know how to make this right." "You can't," I said softly, finally meeting his gaze. "But you can remember it. You can live with the consequences of your actions." The truth of my words hit him hard, and in that moment, I knew he understood. He could apologize, he could beg for forgiveness, but it didn't matter anymore. I had taken control of the situation. I had made him realize just how far gone our relationship was. He wasn't going to get away with this, not without paying the price. "I'll leave now," he said, his voice hollow, as he pushed his chair back from the table. His pride was wounded, and I could see it in the way he stood, trying to hold onto some semblance of dignity. I didn't stop him. I didn't beg him to stay. I didn't want him here anymore. His presence no longer had the meaning it once did. I had stripped away everything that had made him feel powerful, and now he was just another person trying to reclaim what was lost. But some things can never be reclaimed. He walked out of the restaurant without another word. I watched him go, but there was no feeling in me. No sadness, no longing. Only the cold satisfaction that came with knowing I had finally made him feel the weight of his actions. The days after his birthday were strangely quiet. The tension between us had built to such a crescendo that even his absence didn't feel like a relief. It just felt final. I had done what I set out to do. He knew now, without a doubt, the depth of his betrayal. But I was still left with the aftermath, the weight of what I had done to make him feel my pain. I hadn't heard from him since that night. Not a single call, not even a text. He was avoiding me, and I knew why. He didn't want to face the consequences. But the truth was, he could run all he wanted. He couldn't erase the memory of what had happened. I had taken control of the narrative now. I was the one who held the power, and he knew it. I had won. But winning didn't feel as good as I had expected it to. In fact, there was a hollow feeling inside me that I couldn't shake. Yes, I had gotten my revenge. Yes, I had made him feel the pain he caused me. But now I was left to pick up the pieces of myself, to make sense of everything that had happened. Revenge hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't healed the wound he'd left in my heart. All it had done was expose the fact that I was still broken. I found myself thinking about the future. Where would I go from here? What would I do with the emptiness I felt? The answer wasn't clear. I knew I couldn't go back to the life we had. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. But I also didn't want to remain stuck in the past, in the bitterness and the anger that had consumed me for so long. That's when I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about fixing anything. It wasn't about making the person who hurt you suffer. It was about reclaiming your own power. And in reclaiming my power, I had finally been able to let go of the past. I had taken control of my own narrative. And that, I realized, was the most important thing of all. As the days went by, I focused on myself. I spent more time with friends, reconnecting with the people who had supported me all along. I rediscovered the things that made me happy, things that had been overshadowed by the darkness of betrayal. I started to heal in ways I hadn't thought possible. And although I was still scarred, I knew I was stronger now. I had learned the most important lesson of all, that I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I was enough on my own. Meanwhile, he disappeared from my life. There were no apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. He had been silent for weeks, and I had stopped waiting for him to come back. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. We were both moving on, albeit in different directions. But as time passed, I couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking. Was he regretting his actions? Was he finally realizing the magnitude of what he had done? I had no way of knowing, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. The power was mine now. I had done what I set out to do, and that was enough. It wasn't until weeks later that I received a message from him. It was simple, just a few words, but they hit me harder than I expected. I'm sorry. For everything. I've learned the hard way. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. His words were too late. The damage had been done, and I had already moved on. I wasn't the same person I had been before, and I wasn't going to go back. I had taken my power back, and that was all I needed. The silence that followed his message was oddly freeing. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The weight I had been carrying, the hurt and resentment that had festered for so long, was beginning to lift. I hadn't realized just how much his betrayal had consumed me until now, until I no longer had to worry about him, about his actions or his apologies. I spent the next few weeks focusing entirely on myself. I took long walks, spent time with my family, and immersed myself in things that made me feel whole again. I realized how much of my energy had been drained by him and how little had been left for me. But now I was reclaiming that energy. I was starting to rediscover who I was, outside of the pain and the betrayal. I knew it was a process, that healing takes time. But I also understood now that it wasn't just about healing the wound he had caused. It was about healing from within, rebuilding my own sense of self-worth. And for the first time in a long time, I began to feel hopeful again. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes for his messages, stopped wondering if he would reach out. His absence no longer consumed me, and that was a huge victory. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again, like I wasn't living in the shadow of what had happened. But despite the progress I was making, there were still moments when the memories crept in. I'd hear a song on the radio that reminded me of him, or I'd pass by a place we used to visit together. The nostalgia would hit hard, and for a brief second, I'd be caught in the grip of the past again. I had to fight those moments. I couldn't let myself slip back into the sadness, back into the mindset that had kept me tethered to him for so long. I had to remind myself that I was better off without him, that the betrayal was a reflection of who he was, not who I was. One evening, after a long day at work, I found myself sitting alone on the couch, scrolling through old photos on my phone. There it was, the picture of us, smiling and happy, on our last vacation together. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at how naive I had been. But as I stared at that image, I realized something important. That person in the photo wasn't the person I was anymore. I had grown. I had learned. I was stronger. And I would never let someone else take that strength away from me again. As I sat there, I made a decision. It wasn't just about moving on from him. It was about never allowing myself to fall into that trap again. I was done with the games, the manipulations, the hurt. I was ready to move forward with my life on my own terms, and no one, not even him, would have the power to take that from me. The next day, I deleted all of his messages. I unfriended him on social media. I erased every trace of him from my life. It was liberating, in a way. I wasn't holding on to the past anymore. I was finally free. But just as I thought I was done with everything related to him, life threw one more curveball my way. It was a message from his best friend. A simple, unassuming text that changed everything. "He's been asking about you. He really regrets what happened and he wants to apologize again. He misses you." The message hit me like a ton of bricks. For a second, I froze. Why was he still trying to reach me? What did he want now? He had already apologized, and I had already moved on. I didn't owe him anything. But as I sat there, contemplating my response, I realized something important. I didn't need his apology to move forward. I didn't need his approval to heal. I had already done the hard work. I had already forgiven myself. And that was all that mattered. Days turned into weeks, and I settled into a rhythm of healing. I started embracing my independence more than ever before. The freedom I had found in being alone felt like a newfound power. I had rediscovered parts of myself that I had buried under the weight of a relationship that no longer served me. But just when I thought I had finally let go of everything, life had other plans. It was a message that caught me off guard, one I never expected. The text came in late at night when I was curled up in bed, reading a book. It was from him again. This time, more urgent, more personal. "Please, we need to talk. I've been thinking about what happened every day. I can't live with myself knowing how badly I hurt you. Please let me explain." My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of frustration and confusion rising within me. Why now? Why after everything? He had had his chance to make things right, and he chose not to. Now, after months of silence, he wanted to apologize again? I stared at the screen, torn between the desire to confront him and the overwhelming need to protect my peace. "You've already had your chance," I typed back, my fingers shaking as I typed the words. "Your actions spoke louder than any apology you could offer." I didn't expect him to reply so quickly, but he did. "Please, I need to tell you everything. I owe you that much. Just one last conversation." I stared at the message for a long time. My mind was a storm of thoughts. Part of me wanted to hear what he had to say, just to finally get closure. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew that it would only open old wounds. I had worked too hard to move on, too hard to regain control of my life. I couldn't risk losing myself again. But curiosity got the best of me. I agreed to meet him, but I made one thing clear. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again. This was going to be a conversation, not a plea for forgiveness. And I wasn't going to let him twist my emotions once more. We met in a small cafe, the same place we had gone to many times before. But this time, the air between us was different. It was charged with a tension that made the space feel smaller. As soon as I saw him, I couldn't help but notice how different he looked. His posture slumped, his eyes dark with regret. He wasn't the confident man I once knew. This version of him seemed broken, and I couldn't decide if that made me feel sorry for him or just more vindicated. "I don't know where to begin," he started, his voice filled with emotion. "I've messed up and I can't fix it. I know that now. But I've spent so many nights just thinking about how badly I hurt you. You didn't deserve any of it. I betrayed you, and I'm so sorry." I wanted to shout at him, to tell him everything I had been feeling. I wanted to remind him of the countless lies, the coldness, the lack of empathy when I needed him the most. But instead, I sat in silence, listening to him pour out his regret. It felt almost rehearsed, like he had practiced what he was going to say, as if he knew exactly what words would make me feel pity for him. But I wasn't going to fall for it this time. "I don't need your apology," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "I've moved on. I've healed, and I'm not the same person I was when you left me in the dust." "But I still love you," he said, his eyes pleading. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I kept it in check. Love? Did he even know what that word meant anymore? "You don't love me," I said calmly. "If you did, you would have never hurt me the way you did. Love isn't about apologies after the damage is done. It's about respect, loyalty, and honesty from the very beginning." He fell silent at my words, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else, but he didn't. Instead, he just stared at me, as if trying to hold on to a memory that had long since faded. And in that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for months. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was free. "I can't be a part of your past anymore," I told him quietly. "We're done, and it's time for both of us to move on. I've already forgiven you, but it's not for you. It's for me." With that, I stood up, leaving him behind. I didn't look back, not even once, because I knew that my story with him was over. And as I walked out of the cafe, I realized something important. I wasn't just free from him. I was free from the weight of my past. It had been a week since our final conversation. I had given him everything I could in that moment. My truth, my closure, my forgiveness. But now I had to focus on myself. There was nothing more to say. There was nothing left to fix. I was walking away from a past that had weighed me down for too long, and it felt liberating. But it also felt like a new beginning, one that I wasn't sure I was fully prepared for. That week, I threw myself into everything that had been neglected while I was drowning in the aftermath of the betrayal. I worked on my passions, spent more time with friends, and explored hobbies I had abandoned for him. It was a process of rediscovery, learning to be alone, but not lonely. Learning that my happiness didn't depend on anyone but myself. But as time passed, I started to realize how much I had grown, how much I had learned from the entire ordeal. I wasn't the same person I was when I first met him. I wasn't the same person I was when I gave him my heart and trust. I had learned to be stronger, to be more resilient, and I was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. The healing process wasn't linear. Some days were easier than others, but each day I spent focused on myself was another step away from the person I used to be. I started to notice the small things that made me happy. The morning coffee that tasted better when I made it myself, the quiet moments at home, the joy of having my own space. I began to appreciate the freedom I had gained, the peace that came with not constantly questioning everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my life, of my choices, and of my emotions. Then came the day when I bumped into him again. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I had expected. But there he was, standing across the street from me, looking just as lost as he had the day we broke up. He didn't see me at first, but I saw him. And as I stood there watching him, I realized that the anger and hurt I once felt were gone. The pain that had consumed me for so long had faded into the background. He noticed me a moment later, his eyes widening when our gazes met. For a second, time seemed to stop. The years of hurt and betrayal flashed before my eyes, but this time I didn't feel the need to confront him. I didn't need to prove anything to him anymore. He was just another person now, a chapter in my life that had already been written. He took a tentative step toward me, but I held up my hand, signaling for him to stop. The last thing I needed was another apology, another round of meaningless words. I had already heard it all. I had already forgiven him. "You don't need to say anything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've already moved on. We both have." "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice filled with genuine regret. "I know," I replied, not looking at him with anger or resentment, but with a sense of finality. "But it's over now. It's time to let it go. For both of us." I turned and walked away, not looking back. The sound of his footsteps fading behind me felt like the closing of a door that had been open for far too long. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was free. And with every step I took, I realized that I wasn't just walking away from him. I was walking toward the person I had become, the person I was proud of. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. I had let go of the past. I had chosen myself. The final goodbye had been hard, but it was the most important thing I could have done for myself. And as I stepped into the future, I knew that it was mine to shape, mine to create, and no one could take that from me. It's funny how life works. We spend so much time thinking that a person, a relationship, a moment will define us. But when we let go, when we finally stop looking back, we realize that we are the ones who define our own lives. It's not about the people who come and go. It's about how we handle what's thrown our way, how we decide to move forward. After seeing him that day, I thought I might feel something, maybe a pang of regret or a rush of old feelings. But there was nothing, just calm, just peace. That's when it hit me. I had let go, and I didn't need him or anyone to validate my worth anymore. I had already done that for myself. Over the next few months, I started building a life that was just mine. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I wasn't living in the shadow of his betrayal. I was living for me, for the things that made me feel whole, for the dreams I had put on hold. And slowly, the pieces of my life started to come together in ways I hadn't anticipated. I went on solo trips, visited places I had always wanted to see but had never gone to because of him. I started writing again, something I had once loved but abandoned because I had been too consumed with him and the relationship we once had. I poured my energy into new friendships, relationships that weren't clouded by fear or insecurity. I was learning to be content with myself. I was learning to love my own company, to find joy in the little things that had once seemed insignificant. Life was starting to feel full again, like a canvas that had been washed clean. ready for new strokes of color and meaning. But as much as I loved the freedom I had found, there was a part of me that feared what came next. What if I couldn't love again? What if my heart was too broken to trust anyone else? I had been hurt before, and I wasn't sure I was ready to open myself up to that kind of vulnerability again. That's when I realized that love wasn't something I had to find. It wasn't something I needed to search for. Love would come when it was ready, and I wasn't going to rush it. I wasn't going to force it. I knew that I had to give myself the time to heal completely, to let the scar of the past fade away so that I could make room for a future filled with love, trust, and possibility. The truth was, I had already experienced the kind of love that felt all-consuming, but it had taught me something invaluable. Real love wasn't about sacrifice or losing yourself in someone else. It was about partnership, respect, and two people coming together to build something beautiful. And until I met someone who understood that, I was content. I stopped worrying about what I couldn't control. I stopped looking for answers in places I had already found them. I knew now that the only way to move forward was to embrace each day as it came. No expectations, no regrets, just living in the moment and trusting that everything would fall into place when it was supposed to. One afternoon, as I sat by the lake, watching the sun set and reflecting on everything that had brought me to this point, I realized how far I had come. The girl I used to be, the one who had been so desperate to fix everything, to hold on to someone who didn't deserve her, was gone. She had been replaced by a woman who knew her worth, who had learned the hard way that happiness came from within. And in that moment, I felt proud of myself, proud of how far I had come, proud of the strength I had found in my own heart. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And now I was ready for whatever came next. Because I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer waiting for anyone to save me. I was saving myself. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. I was happier now, genuinely happy. I had built a life for myself that I was proud of, one that was full of possibilities and freedom. There was no lingering pain, no feeling of being held back. I had moved on, and I had accepted that the past would always be a part of me, but it no longer had control over me. It was on a typical day, when I least expected it, that everything changed again. I was sitting at my desk, working on a project I had recently started when my phone buzzed. It was a notification, a post from an old friend on social media. I opened it only to be met with the last thing I thought I would see. There, in the center of the post, was a picture of him. A picture of him with someone new, his arm around a woman who looked just like me. At first, I didn't think much of it. People move on, I told myself. But then I saw the caption, "Happy anniversary to the love of my life." Couldn't have asked for a better person to share my days with. I felt a sudden jolt of confusion. Why was he posting this? Why now? After everything, why would he still be flaunting his new life in front of me? My emotions were all over the place. Hurt, anger, confusion. But most of all, I felt betrayed. Again. It wasn't until I scrolled down to the comments that I saw something that made my heart stop. Someone had written, "Isn't this the woman you were with before? The one you hurt?" I paused. The comment was from someone I didn't recognize, but it made my blood run cold. I clicked on the profile of the person who had commented, and what I found made my stomach churn. It was someone from his past, someone I had never met, someone who had been a part of his life before me. And in that moment, everything clicked. The pieces of the puzzle I hadn't been able to fit together before suddenly made sense. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had been living a double life all along. While I was giving him my heart, while I was sacrificing so much, he had been holding on to someone else, someone from his past, someone he never truly let go of. The anger that surged through me was unlike anything I had ever felt before. How could he do this? How could he lie to me so easily, so convincingly? It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of everything I had ever believed in. And for the first time, I realized the depth of his manipulation. He hadn't just hurt me emotionally. He had used me as a safety net, as a way to keep the life he truly wanted while keeping me on the side. I sat in stunned silence for a long while, processing everything that had just unfolded in front of me. But as the realization hit me, something shifted inside me. The pain I had been carrying for so long was gone. Not because I had healed, but because I now had the clarity I had been searching for. I had thought I was the one who had been betrayed in the relationship. But the truth was, he had been the one deceiving himself. He had never been able to love, to truly give himself to anyone, because he was too busy hiding behind his own lies. I had spent so long focusing on getting my revenge, on making him feel the pain he caused me. But now I understood. My revenge wasn't in the games I played or the plans I set in motion. It was in my strength. It was in my ability to walk away, to build a life without him, to move on without ever needing his approval or his love. And that, I realized, was the ultimate victory. I deleted the social media post without a second thought. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't need to say anything. He had already shown me who he was, and I no longer needed any closure from him. I was free. And the best part was, I didn't need anyone to complete me. I had already become the person I was meant to be. And so, as I sat there, watching the sunset that evening, I couldn't help but smile. I had been broken, but now I was whole again. The journey wasn't easy, but it had brought me to a place I never thought I'd reach. Stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. And just like that, my story came full circle. The betrayal, the revenge, the pain, it all led me here, to freedom, to self-love, to a new chapter where I was the hero of my own story, the person I had been waiting for all along.